Hey everybody! In this video I'll be sharing what I know about Parkinson's disease. I will be going over a lot of information, so I decided I'll be making a series of videos about Parkinson's disease rather than making one giant video to struggle focusing on. First we'll discuss what Parkinson's disease, or PD, actually is, and then we will talk about risk factors that increase a person's likelihood of developing this disease. Next I'll share some facts about the prevalence of Parkinson's disease, including a few people you might know by name that have PD. The information I'm giving here will be based on a presentation I gave in a pathophysiology course, so the next topic of discussion will be the pathophysiology of Parkinson's disease, or in other words, how this disease works inside the body. I actually made a diagram from scratch to help explain this process, so I'm pretty excited to share it with you all. Next, we'll discuss the course of this disease, or in other words, how it progresses over time. And in line with that, one subject I'll spend some time discussing is the manifestations of PD, or how the signs and symptoms present themselves. We'll next move on to labs and diagnostics, and these are essentially the tests that can be used to help figure out whether a person has or does not have Parkinson's disease. Near the end of the series, we will spend some time discussing pharmacological or drug-based treatments, as well as non-pharmacological treatments. Finally, we will wrap up by taking a look at some of the healthcare concepts most closely related to Parkinson's disease, which can help develop a better understanding of what considerations healthcare professionals might have while caring for a client with PD. Okay, so right off the bat, I want to give you a snapshot of what Parkinson's disease actually is. Parkinson's is a neurodegenerative disorder, which is a way of saying that it's a disease of the brain that slowly progresses and worsens over time. PD primarily affects the dopaminergic neurons of the substantia nigra. The substantia nigra is this region in the brain that has lots of dopaminergic neurons, which are neurons that produce a lot of dopamine. Over time, Parkinson's disease causes more and more interference with these dopamine-secreting cells, which causes a progressive loss of dopamine in the brain. Most or all of the effects of PD can be traced back to this gradual loss of dopamine production. Both genetics and the environment can play a role in whether a person is at a high or low risk of developing this disease. There are two types of risk factors that can contribute to someone's likelihood of developing Parkinson's disease. The first type of risk factor is genetics, and the other is environmental. Starting with a deeper dive on genetic risk factors for Parkinson's, there are a few different gene variations that can play a role in developing PD. It's worth noting that only about 15% of the people that develop PD have a known genetic risk factor, suggesting that environmental factors play a bigger role. One gene of interest in the genetics of PD is the LRRK2 gene. The normal form of this gene is not associated with Parkinson's, but over 100 variants of this gene have been associated with it. Variants of this gene are associated with late-onset Parkinson's disease, which is the most common form of PD and starts after the age of 50. The LRRK2 gene influences the body's production of a protein called dardarin, which is actually named after the Basque word for tremor, dardara. Another gene that influences the development of PD is the SNCA gene. SNCA codes for a protein called alpha-synuclein. Again, the normal form of this gene is not associated with the disorder, but variants of the gene are. In this instance, gene variants are actually associated with early onset Parkinson's rather than late onset. Alpha-synuclein is a protein that accumulates in Lewy bodies, and Lewy bodies are an interesting topic all to their own, but if you want more information about them, you should go down to the comment section and write me a comment asking for a video explaining Lewy bodies. Anyway, of the two genes mentioned so far, namely the LRRK2 and SNCA genes, both have variants that are autosomal dominant. If you watched my series about blood types, you might remember that people have 2 copies of a given gene, and even 1 copy of a dominant gene variant will be enough to present genotypically as that variant, rather than the other recessive gene copy. There are also a few genes that have autosomal recessive variants associated with Parkinson's. In other words, having only 1 copy of the disease-causing variant will not be enough to cause the development of PD. 3 such genes that have recessive PD-linked variants are the PINK1 gene, PINK1, the PARK2 gene, PARK2, and the PARK7 gene, PARK7. PINK1 mutations are associated with early onset Parkinson's, and mutations in the PARK7 gene are actually associated with a rarer form of early onset PD called autosomal recessive Parkinson's disease 7. Okay, so that wraps up part 1 of our Parkinson series. We have discussed what we'll be going over throughout the series, and in this installation specifically, we also looked at what Parkinson's really is, and some of the genetic risk factors for PD. In our next installation, we're going to look at environmental risk factors, which might actually play a bigger role in many cases than genetic risk factors, and we will look at the prevalence of the disease both in the country and in the world. Hey, if you found the video interesting, please do share it with someone else that you think might also find it interesting, because after all, what keeps me making videos for this channel is the people watching the videos. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.